table. Now. The voice cut through the elegant hum of La Renaissance, Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant, like a sharp blade through silk. 4 men in maintenance uniforms had just locked the front door. The guests froze in disbelief. Among them sat Victoria Ashford, the powerful CEO of Ashford Industries, one of the wealthiest women in America. She barely had time to react before feeling something cold press against her back. "Transfer $50 million, right now," hissed the man behind her, a scar running down his cheek. "Or your rich friends start paying the price." At the next table, a teenage boy quietly chewed his hamburger. Dressed in a plain school uniform, a worn backpack at his feet, he seemed oddly calm. "Hey, kid," one of the men barked, aiming at him. "You deaf?" The boy Daniel Reeves, age 15, looked up slowly. There was no panic in his eyes, only a quiet, unsettling focus. "I hear you," he said, wiping his mouth with a napkin. "My dad always told me never to waste food. Some people don't have that luxury." The mention of his father stirred something deep inside him. Just 3 months earlier, General Marcus Reeves had died under mysterious circumstances, officially a heart attack. But Daniel knew the truth. His father had uncovered a corruption network that reached the top and paid for it with his life. "Observe everything, son," his father's voice echoed in his mind. "The exits, the timing, the weak spots." "Funny kid," the leader sneered, stepping closer. "Let's see how funny you are when I—" "Sir," Daniel interrupted softly, "you have about 4 minutes and 37 seconds before the police arrive. The silent alarm was triggered the moment you broke that door." The man froze. "How do you know that?" "Observation," Daniel replied. "The manager tapped his watch 3 times when you entered. Panic code. I read it in the manuals my father used to bring home." For a second, silence filled the room. Then the leader laughed cruelly. "Look at this genius. A schoolboy thinks he's Sherlock Holmes." He turned to Victoria. "Transfer the money or the first shot goes to the smart kid." Victoria's hands trembled as she reached for her phone. But when her eyes met Daniel's, something passed between them, a silent code. He blinked once, looked toward the chandelier, then at the fire extinguisher, and back at her. She understood instantly. Years of boardroom wars had trained her to read intent without words, and Daniel's expression said it all. "Trust me." "I need my digital reader," Victoria said, voice steady. "It's in my bag." The leader hesitated, then nodded. That was his mistake. Daniel moved, not impulsively, but with precision. In one motion, he kicked the table leg, sending a metal plate flying into the leader's face. A scream followed, hot sauce splattering across his eyes. Before anyone could react, Daniel grabbed a chair and hurled it at the chandelier above them. Crystal exploded, raining shards and confusion over the robbers. "Back door now!" he shouted to Victoria. The other 3 assailants tried to respond, but the crowd's panic left them without clear targets. One fired at the ceiling, another cursed. Daniel was already in motion. He pulled the fire extinguisher from the wall and blasted a stream of white foam into the nearest man's face. The attacker stumbled, blinded. "Wrong place, wrong night," Daniel said, voice calm and firm. Another man lunged. Daniel sidestepped, deflecting, countering each move executed with quiet precision, just as his father had taught him. Within seconds, the man was on his knees, arm twisted at an impossible angle. Daniel stepped back, keeping his distance. "You chose the wrong restaurant," he said evenly, "and the wrong kid. And you definitely picked the wrong person to threaten in front of me." The leader, still wiping hot sauce from his eyes, finally saw him clearly. That calm posture, that precision of movement, the total lack of hesitation, it wasn't luck, it was training. Who are you?" the man stammered. Daniel didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the restaurant's entrance, where faint sirens could now be heard in the distance. 4 minutes and 40 seconds. Almost exactly as he had predicted. Victoria stood by the kitchen, frozen in awe. The boy she had mistaken for a quiet student had just turned an armed crisis into a controlled operation. 3 minutes, Daniel said evenly, checking an imaginary watch. "I suggest you drop your weapons before my colleagues arrive." "Your colleagues?" the leader scoffed, though his voice cracked with unease. Daniel gave a small smile, measured, unreadable. My father was General Marcus Reeves, commander of the 5th Special Operations Division. He paused, letting the name echo through the stunned silence. He may be gone, but his men still look after the family, and they don't take kindly to anyone threatening the general's son. The kitchen doors burst open. 3 men stepped in civilian clothes, but unmistakably military in bearing. Broad shoulders, steady hands, eyes that had seen battle. They didn't shout. They simply moved with chilling precision, surrounding the robbers like shadows. "Drop your weapons, hands on your heads," ordered the oldest one, in a tone that allowed no argument. The men obeyed instantly. The realization dawned on their faces. They hadn't just chosen the wrong restaurant, they had chosen the wrong target. Daniel calmly returned to his table and picked up his worn backpack. As he slung it over his shoulder, something inside caught Victoria's eye: military folders, surveillance photos, a notebook labeled Operation Cleanup. It hit her like a punch. This boy wasn't there by coincidence. "Sorry for disturbing your dinner, Ms. Ashford," Daniel said politely, as if the last 5 minutes had been nothing but a minor inconvenience. "I hope we can speak later. I have a few questions about your company's relationship with DEFCON Industries." Her pulse stopped. DEFCON Industries, the private defense contractor handling classified government projects. The same company General Reeves had been investigating before his death. Daniel walked toward the exit, pausing at the door. "Oh, and Ms. Ashford," he added, glancing back with that unnerving calm. "Don't try to run. My people are watching every exit in the city. My father taught me, always have a plan B, C, and D." As the robbers were cuffed and led away, Victoria realized a chilling truth. She wasn't looking at a hero. She was standing in the middle of a chessboard, and the teenager she'd underestimated was already several moves ahead. If Daniel Reeves was only 15, what exactly had his father trained him to become? Narrator transition, chapter, CTA section. If you're wondering how one boy managed to turn the tables so fast, don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned, because the truth about who Daniel Reeves really is goes far deeper than anyone imagines. That night was only the beginning. Scene shift, police station. 3 hours later. Victoria Ashford signed her statement with hands that still trembled slightly. Detective Reynolds closed the folder inside. "Ms. Ashford, you were incredibly lucky to have that kid in there," he said. 15 years old, and he acted like a trained operative. Victoria forced a polite smile, but inside her thoughts were racing. Daniel Reeves wasn't luck. He was a problem, a dangerous, calculating problem. When she exited through the back of the police station, her private attorney, James Peterson, was waiting by the limousine. "I want a full background check on Daniel Reeves," she ordered as she stepped inside. "Everything. Family, school, medical records. I want to know what brand of toothpaste he uses." "I've already started," James replied, handing her a tablet. "General Marcus Reeves deceased 3 months ago. Cause of death, massive heart failure. But there's more. He was head of internal audits at the Pentagon. His last investigation? Irregular contracts tied to DEFCON Industries." Victoria's expression darkened. "DEFCON?" she whispered, her throat tightening. "Yes. And Victoria, you might want to see this." He hesitated before continuing. The general's notes mentioned hidden transactions, unauthorized tests and payments routed through offshore accounts. Names were redacted, but we both know who stood to gain the most. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then softly, "He knows." James adjusted his glasses nervously. If the general's son really knows what DEFCON was doing, then this is far from over, Victoria interrupted. Her reflection in the tinted window looked pale but determined. Because somewhere out there, a 15-year-old with the mind of a strategist and the instincts of a soldier had just declared war on her empire. Silent. Victoria turned to the driver and held her tongue, but silence was already broken. Her phone buzzed, an unknown number. "Hello, Miss Ashford. Thank you for not mentioning our agreement to the police. Coffee Corner on 5th Avenue, 3 p.m. Tomorrow, we need to talk about DEFCON's future and Dr." Bile rose in her throat. How did this kid have a private line? She typed, hands shaking. "I don't know who you think you are, but I'm not intimidated by teenagers." The reply was immediate and cold. Neither was my father. 3 days after confronting him about the $840 million siphon from Phantom Equipment Maintenance, he was dead. Coincidence is charming, isn't it? Victoria deleted the message. Her mind ran the numbers. Those files were supposed to be locked in the most secure safes. How did he know the exact amount? She told herself it was blackmail from a grief-stricken teen. Still, the calculus of risk flickered behind her eyes. If Daniel had real proof, the scandal wouldn't just topple DEFCON, it could destroy her entire fortune. 30 years of empire building could evaporate. The next afternoon, she took the seat at coffee corner in a poor disguised sunglasses. Scarf more theater than concealment. Daniel arrived at 3 hours on the dot. School backpack, rumpled uniform, scuffed sneakers. He looked every bit a suburban teen, except for the eyes cold, methodical, the focus of someone used to planning 3 moves ahead. He sat without waiting for an invitation and ordered hot chocolate like they were having a benign chat about exams. "My dad used to take me fishing," Daniel began casually, stirring his drink. "He said patience is a strategist's best weapon. Wait for the fish to bite. Don't force it." Victoria kept her jaw clenched. "He spent 3 years investigating you," Daniel continued, calm as a lecture. 47 false identities to get into shell companies. Trace transfers through a dozen tax havens. 89 hours of recorded conversations. "Those are lies," Victoria said, voice rough. Daniel smiled, not a boy's grin, but something older and sharp. "Of course you'd say that. That's why you sent a heart attack to my father." "You have no proof." "You don't need courts to prove everything," Daniel said. "A private autopsy found digitalis in his blood. It triggers an instant heart failure, almost undetectable unless you know what to look for." He slid a thin folder across the table. Victoria opened it with trembling fingers. Inside, medical reports, toxicology results, photos from the private autopsy. Her world tilted. "What do you want?" she asked, voice hollow. "Justice," he answered simply. "My father served 30 years. He was silenced when he discovered you were profiting off faulty gear equipment that cost lives. Selling it to soldiers and pocketing the rest?" "You're a child," Victoria hissed, clawing for control. "This evidence is illegally obtained, inadmissible. I have lawyers who will bury you. I have resources." "You're right," Daniel agreed, unruffled. "Court is messy. That's not my plan." He opened his backpack, produced a laptop, and turned it so she could see a live page. An investigative platform with millions of followers, led by Kenneth Morrison, a Pulitzer-winning reporter and a former Marine who served under Daniel's father. "One word from me, and 12 million people wake up tomorrow reading The Billionaire Who Killed a General," Daniel said. The floor dropped out from under her. "You can't prove I ordered it. You don't have to prove it in court. You only need enough suspicion." He closed the laptop. "Media scandal, federal probes, panicked shareholders, stock collapse, 72 hours. A heavy silence followed. Victoria realized with a cold clarity that she was boxed in by a 15-year-old with nothing left to lose. All her money, influence, and lawyers were brittle against a plan executed in public view. "But here's how this ends," Daniel continued, voice almost professorial. "You will transfer 51% of DEFCON's shares to a veterans fund controlled by the men and women my father commanded." He spoke the demand plainly, as if setting the terms of a business deal. The implication was devastating. Control of the company would pass to those who'd been betrayed by its products. Victoria's hands tightened on the cup. Around them, the cafe hummed with ordinary life people who had no idea they were witnessing a quiet seizure of power. Outside, the city carried on. Inside, her future had just been rewritten. "You're going to publicly resign from the board," Daniel said quietly. "Say it's due to irreconcilable ethical differences." That's blackmail," Victoria stammered. "No," Daniel corrected, his tone even. "That's restitution." He stood, leaving $5 on the table for his hot chocolate. "You have 48 hours. After that, the world learns how Victoria Ashford made billions while soldiers risked their lives with equipment she knew was unsafe." He turned to go. "Wait," she called after him, her voice cracking. "How? How did a 15-year-old boy manage all this?" Daniel paused, looking back. His eyes softened for the first time. My father started training me when I was 6. Strategy, analysis, coding, encryption. He knew he was surrounded by dangerous people. So he prepared me for the day he couldn't protect me himself. A single tear rolled down his cheek. It was the first real emotion Victoria had seen from him. "You didn't just take my father's life," Daniel said, voice trembling with contained anger. "You created the very weapon that would end yours." Then he walked out, leaving her alone at the table with decades of guilt closing in like walls. As she watched him disappear into the crowded street, one thought haunted her. If a 15-year-old could do this, what else had he already set in motion? Victoria Ashford hadn't built an empire by standing still. 2 hours later, she was on the phone, mobilizing her network. "Find everything on him," she ordered her security chief. "He's just a kid. No real backing, no resources. Locate the files and make them vanish." By midnight, she had a full team working. A private investigator, a former FBI agent, 3 lawyers skilled in burying scandals, and a hacker to break through Daniel's systems. But what she didn't know was that every move she made was being watched. In a small apartment in Brooklyn, Daniel sat before 3 glowing screens. Beside him stood Captain James Rodriguez, a veteran who had served under his father's command for 2 decades. "She just hired Secure Trace Investigations," Rodriguez said, fingers moving rapidly across the keyboard. "Same firm that investigated your father's death and conveniently found nothing." Daniel nodded, jotting notes in a worn notebook filled with data. He hadn't been alone since the funeral. 17 veterans, men and women who owed their lives to General Reeves, had formed his silent network, his family now, his shield. "She'll start by trying to intimidate me," Daniel murmured. "Then, if that fails, elimination. It's how she operates." Rodriguez switched screens. "We found her accountant, Thomas Chun, Seattle. He's willing to testify in exchange for immunity." A thin smile crossed Daniel's face. "My father used to say, arrogant leaders always think they're fighting one enemy. They never realize the army behind him." The next morning, Victoria walked into her office and froze. An unmarked envelope sat on her desk. Inside was a single photo, her leaving her attorney's building less than an hour earlier. On the back, written in graceful cursive, "Ms. Ashford, every move is seen. Every word is heard. Step back while you still choose how you fall." She crushed the note in her hand, but her fingers trembled. Moments later, her phone rang. "Ms. Ashford," said her investigator, Mitchell Barnes, "we've discovered something unsettling about the boy." "Go on," she said, voice tight. "He's not acting alone. We've confirmed at least 12 military veterans watching over him, all former special forces. One of them is Captain James Rodriguez, a cyber warfare expert with clearance on classified operations." Victoria's blood ran cold. 12? "That's only the visible ones," Barnes replied. "The network could be much larger. Miss Ashford, this isn't a grieving teenager. It's a coordinated mission. General Reeves planned it before his death." Victoria ended the call abruptly, pulse pounding. If Daniel had that kind of support, direct confrontation was suicide. Only one path remained: destroy his reputation before he could destroy hers. Within hours, her public relations machine was activated. "Make it viral," she commanded. The narrative is simple. A disturbed teen, obsessed with conspiracies after his father's death, unstable, dangerous. Posts and articles began appearing across blogs and social media, painting Daniel as a troubled prodigy consumed by delusion. But Daniel was ready. When the first smear stories surfaced, he didn't deny anything. Instead, he uploaded a video. The camera showed him sitting in a modest room, school uniform crisp, voice calm and clear. "My name is Daniel Reeves. I'm 15 years old. My father, General Marcus Reeves, died 3 months ago while investigating corruption in military contracts. In the coming days, you'll hear lies about me, that I'm unstable, that I'm obsessed. But remember this, desperate people do desperate things, and truth always finds its way to light." The video spread like wildfire. Within 6 hours, it had over 2 million views. Across the internet, people rallied behind him. The story of a young man standing up to a powerful billionaire captured imaginations everywhere. It wasn't just a scandal anymore. It was a movement. Silent fury settled over Victoria as her plan collapsed into ash. Every smear post, every planted rumor, each one only deepened public sympathy for the boy. "How is he doing this?" she demanded, voice raw, to her PR team. An envelope arrived on her desk, weightless but lethal. Inside, a flash drive and a single handwritten note. 48 hours becomes 24. Transfer or exposure. Choose wisely. P.S. Your lies sped up my timeline. Hands trembling, Victoria plugged the drive into her terminal. 30 seconds of the preview scrolled across the screen. Audio of her discussing payoffs with senators, emails arranging defective gear shipments to combat units, and a photograph, her meeting with a known fixer, dated 2 days before General Reeves's death. She retched in the marble of her office. It hit her then, with a cold, brutal clarity. Daniel had never been bluffing. While she'd been bargaining with a grieving teenager, she'd really been negotiating with a war plan set in motion by a dead general. It wasn't one boy's revenge. It was 18 veterans, 3 years of anonymous work, and a meticulous strategy unfolding with surgical precision. She had not simply made an enemy. She had murdered a general, and generals leave plans behind. Plans that, when executed, could dismantle empires. Less than 24 hours after the ultimatum, Victoria sat across from Daniel in a neutral office. Her pen shook as she signed the transfer documents, relinquishing control of DEFCON. "This is extortion," she repeated for the 10th time, panic rising like bile. "It's restitution," Daniel said, calm as statute. Beside him, Kenneth Morrison, the investigative journalist, watched like a hawk. Victoria scrawled the final signature. "Done. You win. Now give me the evidence." Daniel's smile was not childish. It was the satisfied grin of a strategist delivering checkmate. "This was never about silencing you," he said. "It was about making sure the truth is heard." Morrison opened his laptop. On the screen was a complete exposé, ready to publish. The billionaire who profited from soldiers' blood. How Victoria Ashford built fortunes on faulty gear. Victoria felt the room tilt. "You said 48, she stammered. "You had 48, Daniel corrected, voice cool. "You had 24 when you tried to destroy me first." Captain James Rodriguez entered, heavy folder in hand. "We recorded everything," he said, methodically spreading photographs on the table. Victoria meeting the fixer, exchanging envelopes, accepting a disposable phone, directional cameras, parabolic microphones, GPS logs, military-grade tradecraft turned on corporate corruption. "You can't prove it," she whispered. "We can," Rodriguez replied. "And we already have." He tapped a file. "You weren't only planning to neutralize me. You were planning to eliminate Kenneth as well. A staged accident tomorrow morning." Morrison's smile was grim. "Too bad I work with a team. If anything happens to me, 3 others publish immediately." Victoria collapsed into the chair. The room felt like a tribunal. "What do you want?" she sobbed. "Money? Everything I own? Prison?" Daniel stood, approaching her until he was face to face. "Tomorrow at 6 a.m., the article goes live." He spoke each hour like a clock striking doom. "At 7 a.m., the FBI receives the evidence of corruption and attempted murder. At 8 a.m., the senators you bribed receive the financial records. At 9 a.m., when the markets open, Ashford Industries collapses. Investors flee. Allies deny knowing you. You will watch everything you built implode. Powerless. Just as my father watched his work die while he could not stop it." He looked at her then, steady and severe. "My father spent 3 years documenting what you profited from while soldiers died. How many families did your greed ruin? How many widows? How many children?" Victoria's pleas dissolved into a raw, incoherent wail. "Please, I have a family." "The difference," Daniel said without heat, "is that your family will survive, embarrassed, broken, and perhaps visiting you in federal custody." Morrison closed the laptop. "It's time." Daniel moved toward the door, then paused. He looked back once, not to gloat, but to deliver one last quiet truth. "You made me an orphan at 15, he said softly. "You turned me into what I needed to be. Now you'll watch the consequences unfold." Then he left, and Victoria was left with the echo of footsteps and the knowledge that every choice she had made was now public record. The next morning would decide whether she fell with dignity or crashed in ruin. "Ms. Ashford," Daniel said quietly, pausing at the door, "there's a lesson you never learned. True power doesn't come from money or influence. It comes from integrity, from strategy, and from the people who believe in you. You had billions, but you stood alone. I had nothing but the memory of an honorable father and an army of loyal hearts willing to fight for the truth." He turned and walked away, the door closing behind him with the finality of a verdict. Victoria sat motionless in her chair, surrounded by the silence of an empire collapsing. Every deal, every secret, every hidden fortune, all dissolving like dust. The next morning, the world erupted. Headlines filled every screen and newspaper. "Billionaire exposed in defense scandal. Empire built on corruption collapses overnight." Victoria Ashford's downfall was as spectacular as her rise had been. And at the center of the storm stood a 15-year-old boy who had turned grief into justice and revenge into legacy. 6 months later, Daniel Reeves turned 16. No longer an invisible orphan, but the founder and director of the General Reeves Fund, a billion-dollar foundation dedicated to exposing corruption and supporting families of fallen soldiers. The very shares once owned by DEFCON Industries now funded modern, safe equipment for troops around the world. Victoria Ashford began serving a 25-year sentence for conspiracy, fraud, and attempted murder. Kenneth Morrison won his second Pulitzer for uncovering the decades-long network of deceit that her empire had tried to hide. Every Sunday, Daniel visited his father's grave. He would place fresh flowers, straighten the small flag, and whisper softly, "We did it, Dad. Justice, not just for you, but for every soldier who deserved better." He stood for a long moment, letting the wind move through the trees, and finally smiled, not with vengeance, but with peace, because the truth had won. Narrator, closing. True power isn't measured in wealth or influence. It's built on honesty, courage, and loyal allies who fight for what's right. Victoria Ashford had billions, yet died in solitude. Daniel Reeves had only the memory of an honorable father, and turned it into a movement that changed the world. The greatest revenge was never destruction. It was legacy, transforming pain into hope for thousands. If this story of courage, justice, and redemption moved you, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, because sometimes all it takes is one 15-year-old with the right training to bring down an empire built on lies.